Welcome, 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 welcome to today's live stream. This one is going to be fun. This one is going to be exciting. I'm super pumped to talk about this topic because I'm getting a ton of questions about it. And I get it all the time, right? And it's the proverbial question: how do I sell and buy a home at the same time? Because let's be honest, if you are doing it, sometimes it could feel like you're juggling flaming swords. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. And you hear all these things from all these people, maybe some horror stories, hopefully some better stories than that, about how to be successful when you are buying and selling a home at the same time. And look, if you know me, you know this channel is all about selling your home, right? But here is the reality. 2/3 of people who sell their homes are going to be buyers and purchasing a new home. 2/3 at least. That is a huge portion of you, right? So you're coming here, you're looking for advice, how to get your house ready, some renovations you can do to really improve your home so you can maximize the value of it. But at the same time, once you do that, where do you go next? Where do you go next? Most people have to buy a home, right? You have to buy a home as well. Let's turn this music down a little bit. And when you buy and when you're buying and you're selling at the same time, where do you start? Where do you start? Do you need to sell your home first, right? Do you need to buy first? That's everything about buying and selling your home at the same time we're going to be covering today. This is going to be a full hour of extremely valuable content, and it's going to cover almost everything you need to know. There's always things that are going to pop up. There's always things that are going to pop up, and I have all my notes ready for you to go. So if you see me look down, it's only because I want to make sure that I'm delivering you the most valuable content. And in order for me to do that, I got to write a lot of stuff down. I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to retain all this information, right? Because I have a ton of experience and knowledge about real estate, but it's hard for me to retain and really deliver as much value as I can if I don't write it down. So I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Today's Black Friday. It is noon. This is not the normal time for us, but hey, look, we made it work. I have my kids home. There might be a chance you hear them yelling and screaming in the background. I actually had to move upstairs instead of my other office downstairs. So this is, again, just setting the stage for today. This is one of the most important things. This is going to be one of the most important videos that you can watch to get you ready for 2025 if you're buying and selling at the same time, right? Buying and selling at the same time. Here is the reality and why this topic is so critical, especially in 2025. Buying is way harder than selling in today's market. Buying a home is harder than selling a home in today's market. Why is that? Well, if you've been following me, if you've been watching any of my previous live streams or videos about the market, even if you haven't, I'm going to explain why. We are in a strong seller's market nationwide, okay? Now, I know what you're going to say, Sean, not in my area. We're in a neutral market or a buyer's market. Look, there's always pockets that are going to differ from everywhere else. There's always going to be different areas that don't follow what is happening nationwide. But if you take a look as a whole, for the most part, we are in a very strong seller's market across the US, okay? The reason why is because we have record low inventory. That is the main reason why we are in such a strong seller's market nationwide, because we have record low inventory. Okay. With record low inventory, that means that there is a very strong demand for housing from buyers. There are way more buyers in the majority of markets across the US that are looking for homes, and they just haven't found it yet because of the record low inventory. On top of that, we also have higher interest rates. Now, if you are in the market from post-pandemic until now, you have either purchased and refinanced, or you purchased and you had a great rate so you didn't have to refinance, or you didn't buy and you've been wanting to, and you've been holding off for whatever reason. You thought values were going to come down. Maybe you thought the market was going to crash, and it never really did. So you ended up not buying. And now you're in a position where, for whatever reason, you need to, or you need to sell, right? And you're in this waiting point. You're in this purgatory of real estate because rates are high. They showed some signs of coming down just in September. They were in the low 6%, and now they've gone back up closer to high 6s, closer to 7s. And now you're like, okay, well, the election's over, so things are going to start stabilizing more. Hopefully the economy will, by all accounts, all the major economists say that we have a great economy and record job growth and low unemployment and record wage growth, right? But if you ask the majority of people, they're not going to say that. They don't believe that, right? Because it all comes down to how are you feeling right now. So anyway, you have rising rates, you have record low numbers of homes that are actually for sale, and that's what's caused it to be way more difficult to buy in this market than sell. Because as you know, on the sell side, if you're in the vast majority of the US, especially where I'm located in the Philly suburbs, it's still a strong seller's market. It's still a strong seller's market, and it is like that throughout the country. Okay, so it's just setting the stage. Timing is everything. Timing is very, very, very important when it comes to selling and buying a home at the same time. We're going to get into the importance of it. We're going to get into things to avoid, mistakes you can possibly make. We're going to get into planning. We're going to get into everything about this topic because it's going to be very, very important for you moving forward, right? So we're going to talk about actionable steps to avoid pitfalls and ensure a smooth transaction, and real world solutions for managing timelines, finances, and logistics, right? So whenever I have conversations with clients, buyers, sellers, investors, the beginning of the conversation always starts with mindset. Your mindset going into this stage is vitally important. And I understand that you may have a lot of fears around what is going to happen. Generally, as human beings, we have fear around things we cannot control. We have fear of missing out. We have fears about making costly mistakes. We have fears about things that we can control and things we can't control. That's why it is so important for you to be in that right mindset going into this stage of selling and buying home simultaneously. You're not going to be able to control everything, okay? It just simply doesn't work. It's impossible to be able to control every facet of both of these transactions because there's so many different people that are involved. There's so many different people that are involved. You have you as a seller and soon to be buyer. You have the agent who's representing you. You have the agent on the other side. You have lenders, you have brokers, you have all kinds of buyers coming through your house, title reps. You have so many different people that are involved in this besides just you. So if you think that you are able to control the outcome, that is one vitally important thing that I want you to get out of your mind going into this. You cannot control everything. It is physically, emotionally, psychologically impossible. Okay. And I need to say that because so many people, they think it's just going to go perfectly smooth, no bumps in the road, and you're going to sell successfully and buy successfully. Very, very, very rarely does that happen. So getting in that right mindset and understanding, like, okay, I can't control everything. There's not any chance that I can control everything and everyone in this situation, in this scenario. So I'm just going to roll with the punches. I'm going to have a solid team behind me to get me through this, right? So now let's look at some of the main fears that you may be having, right? What if my house sells before I find a new one? This is such a common concern, okay? This creates anxiety about temporary housing and financial risk. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I didn't turn my phone off. What if my house sells before I find a new one? Well, we're going to talk about the planning aspect of it because we can essentially wipe out that fear completely because we're going to have certain contingency plans in place if that does happen for you. Now, it doesn't always happen, but it does happen, right? And it's trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do? Am I going to be homeless? Oh my God, am I going to have to rent a short term rental for a few weeks or a couple of months? Am I going to have to stay in a hotel? Am I going to have to stay with my family? Ugh, I just spent all this time with my family for Thanksgiving. I don't want to spend weeks and months with them. We're going to talk about all that. The next fear that I hear a lot is, can I afford to buy without selling first? And I'm excited to dive into that as well and give you some other options because many people, they overestimate their financial capacity, which leads them to make costly mistakes. And that's what I want you to avoid. I want you to avoid those costly mistakes. Okay. And then we're going to talk about another fear that a lot of people have. And this is probably the number one. And it's, how do I juggle the stress of these two major transactions? Because we know, you know, that stress is a killer. Stress can really affect your mental state. I deal with it all the time. You know, it's one of those things. It has you on that stress roller coaster. You're so worried about each and every step of the process. You're so worried about finding the right home. Because again, look, there will most likely for you be no issue selling your home. There won't. You're probably going to list it, you know, if you do everything correctly and follow the process. You know, I just created a couple different videos about that, about the 10-step process. One is a shorter, more condensed version, and one is a live stream like this. That is, you know, me talking more about it, but I'll make sure I link to that in this live stream so you can see them, so you're more prepared, because that's what it's all about, being prepared so you don't make costly mistakes. But juggling the stress between these two major transactions, because it's a lot. Because on top of this, on top of selling your home and buying, you also have life. You know, you have your life to deal with. You have your jobs, you have your families, you have your friends, you have commitments. There's so much that is happening besides you just selling and buying a new home, right? So that's why it's so important to understand that stress is normal. Stress is normal and it should be part of the process. And the way we mitigate stress the most, and I literally feel like a broken record as I say this all the time, is having a solid plan of action. That's it. That's the secret. That's the key. If you want to mitigate your risks when you're selling or buying a home, you have to have a solid plan of action. Full stop. That's it. Okay. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to get into having that plan of action because your situation is not the same as somebody else's. There's a lot of different scenarios that you can be involved in when it comes to buying and selling. There's a lot of different things that can happen, and everyone is in a different position. But we want to help you feel confident, and we want to help you feel like you're in control of as much as you can be. Because again, you can't control everything, but there's a lot of the process that you can control. And if you have that solid strategic approach and a solid plan, you will be successful when we do this. Okay. So let's jump into that, adopting a strategic approach, because it is so important for you. So you want to think long term and treat buying and selling as two pieces of the same puzzle. Every decision impacts the other. Every single decision that you do impacts the other. And this leads into that one main question. We have two main questions I want to talk about when it comes to this approach, to having a strategic approach is, do you need to sell your home to afford your next one? Do you need to sell your home in order to buy and afford the next one? So this is why I say that people are always in different positions. Excuse me. If you need to sell your home and utilize the equity from your home for your down payment when you buy, that is going to be a different approach than if you need to sell, or if you do not need to sell your home because you have the funds to put down for your down payment and your closing costs when you buy. They're two completely different approaches, okay? If not, right, does buying first align with your financial criteria, your financial needs? When you need to sell your home first and utilize those funds, it can be a little bit trickier. It's obviously not impossible. I've helped dozens of people do this, dozens, right? So if you are selling first and you need to utilize that equity, there's a couple different strategies that we'll get into in a little bit that you can use in order to buy first or sell first and then buy a home. Okay. And then on the flip side, if you don't need to sell first because you don't need those funds and you can buy first, that buys you so much more time. It gives you so much more time. It gives you so much more flexibility as well. And that is what you want. Hey, Jen, thanks for coming. I didn't know if you would be able to jump on the stream today. I appreciate that. Sorry, I want to make sure I stay in touch with everyone that's live with me and asking questions. If you have any, whether you are seeing this live or if you see it tomorrow or in a couple weeks, again, this is going to be something that is extremely valuable. And I'm not going to make it timely. It's not like this is exactly what you need to do in 2025, right? Because you can utilize this information whenever you decide to sell and buy, whenever. Right. So we were talking about that strategic approach and whether you need to sell first or whether you need to buy first. And again, I'm going to get into that into more depth in more detail later on in the stream. Now I want to talk about something that I love talking about, which is setting realistic expectations. Okay. Here are some of the potential challenges that you can come across, right? Misaligned closing dates. Now, in the most perfect world, you will be able to sell your home and buy your new home on the same day. That's the most perfect scenario. You list it now, the beginning of December, you close the end of December, right? Let's just say you list your home, you sell it and blah, blah, blah. It's a quick sale. You find the home, make an offer, quick sale. So you sell your home at 9 in the morning, and then you buy your new home at 11 in the morning, right? That's obviously the most perfect scenario. I'm not gonna say rarely works out that way. It happens that way a lot, but something always happens. It misaligned these closing dates, and it makes you juggle temporary housing. It makes you juggle potentially dual payments. If you have scheduled things, and this is one of the challenging things. If you have scheduled the movers, you scheduled the utilities to be transferred on a certain day, and then everything gets pushed back, right? Because these are the realities. Reality is anything can happen that alters that day for you. So you might have to essentially go back and try and renegotiate things. Your rate lock might end on December 31st. So as soon as you get into January, your rate could potentially be different. Or you pay a little bit extra money, or you have the seller, right? There's again, there's so many different things. solutions. You can explore rent back agreements if for some reason you're able to sell, but you can't buy and the buying timeline gets pushed back. Well, maybe the buyer who's purchasing your home, you can have a rent back option with them. It helps you stay in the house currently, and then you could potentially find short-term housing if you can't, like, if you have to be out and the buyer who's buying your home has to be in, but the home you're buying got pushed back a week or 2 weeks, right? You have to be flexible with your timeline and have contingency plans in place. That's why I'm always talking about buying and selling and creating a plan. If you look at this objectively and you think to yourself, "Okay, what can I do if you're selling and buying on the same day?" And you know this. This is the plan that you have in place. And look, I can't get into every single different plan that you can have because everybody's situation is different, okay? If you're selling your home in California and you're moving here to Downingtown, Pennsylvania, it's going to be much trickier to do something like that if you're moving cross country when those settlement dates and those timelines get skewed and they get pushed back. Because you're like, okay, my house is settling in California at the end of the month, and maybe you're buying your new home at the beginning, not on the same day, but maybe the next week. So you sell in California, you have the moving truck already, you're driving across country, right? And you get settled. Maybe you're staying in a hotel or an Airbnb for a couple of days before you end up buying, but then that settlement gets pushed back for reasons that you are unforeseen. Maybe that seller, because they're selling their house to you as the buyer, maybe for some reason they got caught up and they can't perform on the settlement date because they're trying to find, right? There's so many moving parts. That's why you have to have a plan in place and then a contingency for when things go off the rails. Because it's almost, I don't want to say guarantee, but it's likely that things will go off the rails, right? And you have to understand that. So let's get into the buying and the selling process. When you are buying a home, whether you are selling at the same time or just buying, maybe you're a first time home buyer or something, it's very important to understand your financial picture. And what I mean by that is the first step is getting a pre approval. You have to have a pre approval. If you're considering the sell buy simultaneously, the first step for the buy side is understanding your financial picture, understanding where you are going to buy a home, at what price, at what monthly payment do you want to be at? What do the taxes need to be? What about homeowners insurance? What is going to be the move-in cost? Because there's move-in cost for these properties that not a lot of people think about. The moving cost, so moving all the furniture, and then you have the cost of making any updates you want before you move in, if that's what you want to do. You have your closing costs, which the majority of people understand closing costs. If you don't, then it's generally, that's the closing costs are the closing costs I'm talking about, not your down payment. Closing costs are the other fees involved with you purchasing a home, separate from the down payment for a mortgage. Generally, it's 1 to 3% of the purchase price. So you have that, right? So you have all these different costs where you have to understand where you are financially. And then once you have that idea, then you are talking to your lender. You're giving him or her your financial picture. This is the cash we have on hand. These are a couple of accounts, maybe a 401k or a retirement account or something you can pull from if you need to, if it makes sense. Then you have these numbers in mind. You have these financial figures where you're like, okay, You're gonna be selling your home, but you're gonna be buying a $500,000 home. You wanna put 20% down, 25%, whatever you have. You don't necessarily need it. You have that down payment, okay? You have it in your account. So it makes the selling process a little bit smoother, right? And then what you wanna do is start the buying process first, and then you can think about selling later. So you have to understand that having a pre-approval is critical. Without a pre-approval, you risk overestimating your buying power and you misalign your expectations. And once you misalign those expectations, that's when things start to go off course. And you might not know it at the beginning, but it hits you at the wrong time. That's why I always tell people, don't buy above your means. Think about it like this. When you're buying, in my opinion, one of the only things that matters is what is your monthly payment going to be? What can you afford? And how do you get to that monthly payment? You can be qualified in some cases to buy a $600,000 home, right? Does that mean you should buy a $600,000 home? Because if you do, and you're putting 20% down and your monthly payment is 3,800 a month, is that realistic for you? Do you and your spouse, if you have one, do you guys make 3 times that $3,800 a month, right? Because you don't want your, mortgage to be 50% of your monthly income. Well, you can get qualified to buy that much, but think about it in terms of where do you want your monthly payment to be? You want your monthly payment to be 2,500 and you're buying a $600,000 home, and the taxes are 5, 6, 7,000, homeowners insurance is 1,000. Maybe you're getting it buying an HOA where you're like, "Okay, I want it to be 2,500." Well, I don't think 20% down is going to be enough. You might have to do 30 or 35 or 40% to get to 2,500. So in that case, you're thinking, "Okay, well, maybe I do need to sell first to get a little bit more money for the down payment." These are all things that you need to be thinking about. That's why it's so important to have that pre-approval. That's why it's so critical to have that pre-approval first and to not buy above your means. The couple couple financial risks of buying first are this too, and this is important, really listen up. Carrying 2 mortgages can quickly strain your budget, especially if your first home takes longer than expected to sell. This is possible. The good thing is that when you buy a home, if you close on, let's say, December 1st, your first payment shouldn't be until January 1st, right? So you have a little bit more time to come up with that first payment. And in some cases, you can really do it strategically where you don't pay your first payment for 2 months. And that's like if you buy closer to the end of the month, so you skip January and then you end up paying in February or something like that. If you bought, let's say, June 28th, you would skip July and then you would pay in August. So you have a little bit more flexibility, right? And you can try your best to strategize and get that in line. So if your home is for sale currently and you're not getting any offers, but you're under contract to buy, you got to understand, like, you could be carrying 2 mortgages. Can you financially carry 2 mortgages? That's an important thing for you to understand. And then qualifying for a second mortgage while carrying the first is challenging unless you have a significant income or savings. So you also have to think about that too, because when a lender is determining how much you qualify to buy, they're looking at your debt to income ratio. Your debt to income is going to be affected severely about how much your current mortgage payment is. So if you have a high current mortgage payment and then you have your credit card bills, car payment, student loans, things like that, your debt to income might be a little bit higher, right? So you got to also look into that as well. You got to understand that there are financing options that you can utilize that you might not hear about a lot, but they're available to you. So you can utilize a bridge loan or a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. short-term liquidity, but they come with a high interest rate and strict repayment terms. So with a bridge loan is pretty interesting. Essentially, you can find a company that will allow you to use the equity that you have in your current home in order to put as a down payment for the home that you purchased without selling it first. That's what a bridge loan is. So, say you have a home that's worth $500,000 and your current mortgage on it, principal and interest is 300,000. So you have $200,000 of equity. But let's just say you're buying a home first and you're not selling first, but you still need to utilize that equity. You can find companies, there's companies out there that will allow you, they'll give you a loan for that equity and say, here you go, use this as your down payment. And then once you sell your house, you pay us back, but the interest rate is high. So you're going to pay back however much you used essentially for the down payment, however much money you need for the down payment plus interest. So it's going to cost you a little bit more, but it's just one of those ways that you can utilize or you can get around not having to sell first and being able to buy first, right? And then a home equity line of credit. If you don't know what that is, it's like a credit card against the equity of in your home. So for a primary home, I believe that banks, generally mortgage lenders don't give HELOCs, but banks will give you up to 90% LTV, loan to value. So if you have, let's see, because this is live, right? And I don't do math that high in my head. So let's just say you have $200,000 of equity, 200,000 times 0.9. The bank will give you a line of credit for $180,000, right? That means you still they'll essentially give you a credit card, or they're saying, hey, there's 180 grand on this, or a bank account, but the interest rate is high. It's like 7, 8, 9%. You can utilize that money to have for a down payment. And then when you sell your home, you pay off that home equity line of credit. You pay off the first balance of the mortgage, and then you just continue to live your life, right? So a couple different options there with financing. And really, it's up to you. At the end of the day, it's your decision where you want to go. So let's talk about whether to sell first or to buy first and dive a little bit more into that. When you think about selling first, here are a couple of the pros. You'll know exactly how much you have to spend on your next home. And that really reduces that financial uncertainty. In this scenario, let's stick with you list your home at 500 grand, you owe 300,000, and it sells for 525,000. ZZ, good point. Sorry about that, brother. ZZ, hey man, I appreciate that. Really good point. As a seller, how many agents? I want to answer this before. I don't want to make sure that you don't jump off, but I want to finish my thought real quick about when you sell first, like the pro of selling first. So you know how much money, like say you list it at 500, it sells for 525, and then you got to pay agent fees and your closing costs, and you know you're going to net close to $200,000. So you're like, okay, now I know that I have $200,000. And I can take that $200,000 and I can then go put that as a down payment. Maybe I only want to do 100,000, or maybe I want to do 125,000 or 150, whatever it is, right? You want to configure your down payment and your closing cost to suit your monthly payment. Okay. So it all goes back to monthly payment. That is one of the most important things you need to think about, is what you want your monthly payment to be. But when you sell first and you get that offer and it goes under contract, then you know with more certainty, because that deal could potentially fall through for whatever reason, right? That's why you have to have contingency plans in place. But you have a really good understanding, okay, this is how much I'm gonna be able to put down for the home I buy. Now I'm gonna start that process of looking for my next home and finding an offer. or I'm submitting an offer. Let's see. As a seller, how many agents do you suggest being interviewed? I'm thinking 3. That is like the general. I would say it's not a rule, but I always tell people when it comes to selling, you want to interview multiple agents. 3 is a good amount. Anything more than that is a lot. I'll say this, Z, that not all agents are created equal by any stretch of the imagination. That's why it's important to interview a couple at least. But here's the deal. Like, you might really get a great first impression by the first agent that you interview. You might think to yourself, like, this guy, this girl really knows what they're doing. They know the market. I feel really comfortable with moving forward with them. I don't want to interview anybody else. But if you want to be thorough and you want to really give yourself the best possible chance, then you're going to interview 2 to 3 agents. And again, they're not all made equal. The vast majority of agents are, I would say, they're not qualified to sell your home, right? Because they don't treat it as a business. They do just a few transactions, if that. I mean, I think 50% or less, about 50% of people that are licensed real estate agents in the US last year sold 0 homes. 0. Now, I don't know about you. I like to golf. I actually love golfing. I don't nearly do it as much as I want to. I go out maybe once or twice a year now, right? With my kids, it's hard. And, I feel like I'm always training for my next marathon, so I don't have the time. So I go out maybe 1 or 2 times a year. Now, if you came to me and you're like, Sean, can you give me lessons on how to golf? And I'm like, I only golf once or twice a year. Do you really want lessons from me? Right? I can't be a great teacher for you. I can't teach you how to golf if I only personally do it 1 or 2 times a year, right? And I'm not comparing golf professionals to real estate agents. You can really make a case between real estate and other professions. But you really want to work with someone who is very knowledgeable, has been doing it for an extended period of time. They understand the process of selling. They understand the process of helping you buy. They've done it multiple times, right? At a high level. That's what I'll say. So when you're interviewing agents, just make sure that you choose someone who you can verify everything that they say. Because agents will lie. They'll inflate the value of your home to buy your listing. If the data says 500,000 and an agent comes in saying, yeah, let's list it at 550, I think that's a good idea. But everything else says 500,000. They're just trying to buy your listing, right? That happens, unfortunately. You really have to go by who you truly feel you can trust, who you have a good connection with, and that you can verify what they're saying. Top 3 questions to vet an agent. I'm in a competitive market for the seller. Yeah. So I would just say top 3 questions are, how long have you been doing this for? Right? That's an important question. And I'm not trying to say that new agents are bad to work with. If a new agent is in partnership with an experienced agent or an experienced team, they could be a good person for you, right? If it's a brand new agent who's not being mentored by anybody and they're just got licensed, just got out there and they're like, yeah, let's do this. I would be very hesitant. But if they're in partnership with someone, that's really important. How many homes have you sold? Not just recently, but over the years, because that's important. Now, it's not the only metric I would go by, but that it is important, right? Because you want to make sure that your agent has a true understanding of the market and of the process, especially with listing and selling homes, right? Because that's my specialty, listing and selling homes. I can do it in my sleep, right? It's just one of those things that I've been doing now for almost 9 years. So I would say how long they've been doing it, how many homes have they sold recently, and then this isn't, again, it's not necessarily a question, but it happens during the conversation, right? Like generally sellers, but homeowners that are thinking about selling, they have their BS radar up, and it's like you understand like this person, they just don't feel right for you. Like that has a lot to do with it. You have to really trust them. You have to see that they're legitimate, that they're being honest and authentic with you and not just blowing smoke up your butt to try and get the listing. Like that's really important, man. Yeah, home selling. Yeah, man, same here. 5 to 7 days. I hope that helps, man. See through the BS. Yep. You're absolutely right. I'm going to jump back into this. Please stick around. If you have any more questions, I'll get to them at the end. So yeah, when you're deciding to sell first, that's a pro. You know how much you have, and eliminates the risk of paying 2 mortgages at once, hopefully. Cons are you may need temporary housing if you can't find a new home immediately. Again, we talked about that. Like, understand that. Have that backup plan where you can rent something short term. You can stay with a family member or a friend short term. I know that's hard, right? Especially if you have the wife and the kids and all that stuff. So it's hard to to live with family when you have all that stuff going on. Here's a great solution. I mentioned this earlier, but having a rent back agreement lets you remain in your home post sale while searching for a new one. There has been, it's not an actual contingency in a contract, but I have seen this a lot where people have a clause in the contract that says a suitable housing clause. I'm gonna have to change out my battery for my camera in a little bit. Suitable housing clause, right? So that means that the seller is selling it based upon finding suitable housing for a certain period of time. Let's just say it's 60 days. So that means that when that clause is in there and you as a buyer, you're making an offer, you have to understand that, okay, I'm going to make this offer on today, December 29th. It gets accepted, but I'm going to push out the settlement date for at least 2 months from now. I'm not going to try and do a 30-minute close because I understand that 2 months from now is where I need to be because the seller has a suitable housing clause. They need to find a home. So you as a seller, like you can, especially in a seller's market, you have so much power to control what happens. Okay. It's really, really, really important for you to understand, your buying power or your selling powers, right? Because you can, I hate saying manipulate because it comes off as like a negative term, but you can kind of manipulate the situation a little bit. As long, it has to be in line, has to be a win-win for the buyer too. So if the buyer's flexible, that's amazing. If they can settle in 6 months or 60 days or even 90 days, that helps you tremendously because then you have your house under contract. And moving forward, when you're making an offer, and this is something I actually didn't even have this written down, but I can't believe it. So when you're selling and buying a home at the same time, this is important to know. If you have a contingency, if you have a home sale contingency, it is way more difficult to get your offer accepted in a strong seller's market. Because essentially you're saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, I have my home under contract. But in order for me to buy your house, I have to have this contingency in place that says my house has to sell first. And if you have a home sale contingency in a strong seller's market and you're going against multiple offers with people who do not have home sale contingencies, your offer is not going to get accepted unless you do something, make it such a compelling offer to that seller that they have to accept it. For the most part, though, like your home is not going to stand, your offer is not going to stand out above everybody else, right? Because if you're going up against people who have no home sale contingencies, maybe they waive appraisal contingency. So you're saying like, if I can't get a loan on your home, my earnest money deposit now is at risk to go to you. So that's something to think about as well. when you're selling and buying, it's really hard to get your offer accepted if you have a home sale contingency. And that's where things like that bridge loan, if you find a company that can give you a bridge loan, because that essentially says, we don't care, I'm the bridge loan people. We don't care if your home sells. We know you have equity in it and we know you're going to sell it eventually, but we're going to give you a loan in order to use as an earnest money deposit and a down payment so you can make an offer to buy where it's not contingent upon your home selling, right? Because, hey, we're collecting interest. We want to collect more interest. So we don't really care when your home sells. We know eventually it will, because again, we're collecting interest, we're making money, so we don't have to worry about that. But that is a really important thing to think about. And then extend the transition timeline again, put that in there. Let buyers know ahead of time, especially when you're listing, saying like, hey, I need a 60-day close, I need a 90-day close. Buyers are so hungry to get a home that they're willing to make a lot of timeline concessions in order to get it. I've seen it firsthand. They're like, I love your home. I love this neighborhood. I need to be in it. I don't give a crap if I make an offer now, it gets accepted and I have to settle in 90 days. I don't care. I just want it. Right. So again, and it all goes back to what kind of market in the strong sellers market, the seller holds all the cards. If you're in a neutral to buyers market, it's up in the air. It's 50-50. If you buy first, some of the pros about buying first are you secure your next home in a competitive market before selling. And I can't say enough how important that is. If you're doing both simultaneously, it's so important to be able to like have that security of knowing that you have your home, and then you can even go to settlement and close on it and then list your house, right? But that requires you to have the finances ahead of time. That requires you to have the down payment ahead of time. Cons are adds financial risks if your first home doesn't sell, right? So that's also something to think. You have to have contingencies on the sale of your new home, and they're going to weaken you in a competitive market, which I already talked about. I mean, that's challenging, right? So there's pros and cons to selling first or to buying first. Again, it all starts with having that plan of action and building a really strong connection with your real estate agent. So when it comes to preparing your home to sell, I'm not going to go too much into detail with this. Again, I'm going to link to this in the description of this video after it populates on the page. But I made 2 great videos about this, the entire listing process, right? From start to finish. And it's gold. It's so much information. It's exactly what the exact 10-step process you need to sell your home for the most amount of money, the best terms in any real estate market. So when it comes to preparing your home, just a quick overview. I would highly suggest a pre-listing home inspection. It cuts down on so much BS from a potential buyer when they make an offer on your home and it goes on the contract and they have their home inspection. So getting ahead of that, being proactive and identifying and addressing any issues and major issues is great. Staging, curb appeal, pricing your home, like all of these things are so important to nail before you list your home. I'm going to link to all that. So coordinating timelines and offers. This is something really important. We've touched on a little bit. So work with your agent to ensure sale and purchase timelines align, minimizing the risks of overlap or delays. Here's the reality. Overlaps and delays cost money. And it's on the party who is costing the overlaps or the delays, in my opinion, to pay that cost. If you are locked in with a mortgage, your mortgage is locked. You paid money to lock your mortgage rate, right? Because it's fluctuating a lot. And you have a settlement date set. You know your home, you listed and sold your home, and you're buying same day within a couple hours. The day before, the seller, for whatever reason, cannot get their stuff out of the house on time. I've seen it. I've seen this happen. There's a delay. Their movers canceled on them, and they physically can't get all this stuff out. Look, and you're probably saying to yourself, the day before, are you kidding me? Yes, I've seen this happen the day before. It's crazy, right? Why didn't you move a week ago? So if the seller causes the delay, then the seller should be the one that covers the cost to extend the rate lock. And then you, as a buyer, you go back and you say, hey, you need to cover this cost, right? And then you negotiate from there. And in most cases, most cases, sellers like, I just want to be done with it. That's fine. I know I screwed up. I'll cover the cost. But you're still you're still selling your home. So if the buyer who's buying your home is flexible, you can say, hey, can you push the settlement back to next Tuesday? We had this issue. If not, they're like, we have everything ready to go. We can't push it back. Then you have to do some magic maneuvering, right? And then you have to figure out, okay, I'm going to clean out. Your house is already clean. It should already be cleaned out by now. And you're going to stay with, again, friend, family member, short-term rental, whatever it is, for a few days, a hotel for a few days. Maybe go on a short vacation, right? To get your mind right. I don't know. But there's always things that you can do. There's always things that you can do when it comes to synchronizing those closing dates and trying to get them as close as possible to each other. Ideally, you want it to be on the same day. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that. Same day closings are possible. Again, they require meticulous planning and flexibility from all parties. Again, it's not just you. You have you, the seller, you have the buyer that's buying your home, and then you have you, the buyer, buying the new home, and then the seller of the other home. So you essentially have 4 parties that all have to coordinate with those same day closings. And it's challenging. It's really challenging, but it's very doable. But you just have to be flexible. Managing offers. So for sellers, prioritize buyers willing to negotiate terms like rent back agreements or extended settlements. I talked about that already. You can favor those offers that you get on your home based on those terms, right? So if it's a multiple offer situation and you need to stay in the home for 60 days after settlement, if you have 3 offers, 2 of them are not willing to do that and 1 is, and everything else is pretty much the same, then you can choose the offer that best suits you. Even if one of the offers is higher and you'll make a little bit more money, but they need you to move out at settlement. Whereas the other people, they're like, hey, yeah, you can, once it settles, you can rent it back. You can stay in there. You can have a rent back with actual, the seller who sold, you have to pay us now, or they'll maybe just let you stay in it. Obviously, there's contracts in place so that if anything happens, right, it's on the seller. But you need to really understand that it's very important for you to go with the offer that best suits you and fits your needs. That's the best thing for you to do. Even if you make a little bit less, but the buyer of your property is more flexible and they're willing to meet more terms that suit your needs, that is the better offer to go with, in my opinion. For buyers, be ready to make competitive offers, of course, with minimal contingencies to secure your new home in a tight market. I will never, ever tell a buyer to waive a home inspection. I always give them. Oh, there we go. Be right back. We're still here. Oh, hello, friends. Sorry about that. We're back. We are back. Kelly, I like your flannel. Where did you get that? Hey, thanks for liking the flannel. I got this at American Eagle. Love that place. All right. So going back to offers, be ready to make competitive offers. Yeah. Again, I'm not going to ever tell people to waive contingencies, our home inspection contingency. I give them the pros and the cons. If you waive your inspection contingency, this is what could potentially happen. there's a lot of buyers who were doing that to get their offer accepted. I get it. I understand that. It can be very, very, very costly unless you really know what you're doing and unless you really know housing and you know how to repair things, or you know people who can repair things and you have finances to do it. If you're not savvy yourself, right? It's challenging. I'm telling you, it's challenging to waive home inspections. I would never suggest you do that. But at the same time, I understand that in a lot of markets, it's almost like you got to do it, and it sucks. All right, so we're going to handle the transition, temporary housing, which we talked about, short-term rental options in a lot of markets now. Even in my community, there's short-term rentals, right? And this is a residential community. Everyone that except for like 0.001% now, everyone that lives here long, year round, right? Full time. But there's a couple short-term rentals now. Like they're a walk away from me. So it's like if I was selling my home that I'm in right now, I'm buying something that's close by, and we had to sell and had to get out of the house and we weren't buying for another week, it's like, okay, I could rent this Airbnb. That's an option. So short-term rental options. There is a company called AVE, A-V-E. I believe they're nationwide. I got to look into that, but their whole premise, right? It's apartment style homes that they rent on short-term basis. So it's like, a business person is coming for a couple weeks or maybe a couple months to get a new market, right? Their company is coming into a new market. They need to get it up and running. They'll stay at AVE for a couple months, right? Or, they have options for a week or 2 weeks, right? So there's always options for short-term rental housing. Look for leases with flexible terms that avoid long-term commitments. I mean, I hope that goes without saying, but I just want to say it anyway. Do not get into something that they're going to make you pay for 30 days if you only stay for 2 weeks. Creative solutions, again, rent backs, letting you stay in the home, contract contingencies like that, suitable housing term, you can have that in the contract, right? There's a lot of different things that you can do that are going to help you stay in the home and make it less of a pain if the timeline doesn't line up perfectly, right? There's a lot you can do. And again, it's all situational. So here are a couple common mistakes to avoid that I really want to get to. Let's see. Skipping financial prep work. Again, I talked about this a little bit. So not having a pre-approval up front when you are in that process is a huge mistake. Overpricing your home is a huge mistake. And this is in general if you're selling, overpricing your home, especially if you're thinking about selling and buying at the same time and you overprice your home and then your home sits on the market for way longer just because you wanted to try and overprice it because you thought you could get more. Like, that is always a huge mistake. Price it accordingly and slightly underprice it because you want to get more interest and potentially get multiple offers. But as soon as you overprice, you're going to be chasing the market down and it doesn't end well. I'm telling you, you're selling a house. You're not selling a used car. It does not work that way. Overlooking repairs. So when you're selling and things need to be taken care of, just take care of them up front. If you don't have the finances to do it, you need to disclose it and you need to price your home accordingly. If your neighbor's home sold for $500,000, it was fully renovated. Everything was ready to go, move-in ready. Your home, not as renovated, right? It has an older kitchen. Maybe it was renovated 10 years ago, a couple older bathrooms. You got some plumbing things you need to take care of. A couple outlets aren't working in your house, right? So it's not up to snuff with the other property that's sold for $500,000. Don't try and list your home for $500,000 unless you're in such an extreme seller's market where there's absolutely no homes for sale. But like if you're trying to get that upper echelon price and your home doesn't fit the upper echelon, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure in most cases, right? There's always a potential, there's always outliers. I will say that there's always outliers. Ignoring timing challenges, right? So this is important. Poorly coordinated closings lead to temporary housing expenses or stress of a double mortgage payment. Don't do that. Don't ignore timing challenges, right? Meet the deadlines that are in the contract. Meet the deadlines that are in the contract, please. When you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. There's contract deadlines for a reason because it keeps the process moving forward. Please, when you're getting a mortgage, the first initial step when you submit the paperwork needed to see how much you're approved for, that is just the first step. Lenders continue to need more information as the process goes on. Get it to them as soon as possible. There's nothing more frustrating than you as the buyer not getting the lender everything they need to get the final pre-approval and the clear to close. You are constantly needing to get a lender information until you get the clear to close. Period. So do that stuff ahead of time because it's going to push out the process and just be a pain. And then another mistake to avoid is relying too heavily on risky loans, right? So those bridge loans and those HELOCs I talked about, they are options, but they can be very risky. They're high interest loans. They have strict terms for repayment. And if you miss a payment, it's going to affect your credit. And if your credit gets affected during the buying process, you're going to get denied for your loan. So don't rely too heavily on them. Okay. Now we got some Q&A. ZZ. Oh man. I'm going to go back to you, brother. How does the seller protect ourselves from being played by a buyer and locked in without knowing? Ooh, this is a really good question, man. So here's what you need to do as a seller. This is what your agent should be doing. When a buyer makes you an offer, one of the most important things that the agent can do for you, or if you're selling on your own, you have to do this, is you have to verify with their lender that they have a pre-approval and not a pre-qualification. So pre-qualification is just saying, hey, I have this much money. Hey, I make this much money at my job. I have this in my 401k. A pre-approval means that the lender got all that documentation up front. They got the pay stubs. They got the information from the 401k plan that, they have their bank account balances and things like that. And they're saying, hey, this person is pre-approved. They're ready to go. They have the finances. So it's so important that when you're accepting an offer, you absolutely need to verify with the buyer's lender. Don't just go by the pre-approval. Call them and have a conversation. Call them and have a conversation and see where they're at in the pre-approval process. Make sure that all that documentation is in. That's how you cut down that risk of being played by a buyer. Yeah, the seller protects. Pre-listing home inspection, Z. Yes. Please do that, man. Please do the pre-listing home inspection. Hey, if you need agent referrals too, just click on that link in the description. You can schedule a time with me, man. I'll help you find some people. Do I, as a seller, reveal to agents that I interviewed that I paid for my own pre-listing inspection and wait to share that only when I pick my agent? I would say that, yeah. I mean, you definitely want to let your agent know that you plan on doing a pre-listing home inspection, and understand that when you do the pre-listing home inspection, you're essentially saying like, hey, I want to I want to get ahead of anything major. So you have to disclose anything that was brought up in the pre-listing home inspection. That if it's a material defect or if it's safety or hazard, okay? And then I would say do that with the mindset of saying like, okay, I'm going to address these things, right? So they're taken care of so that a potential buyer doesn't have to worry about it. That's the reason why you want to do a pre-listing home inspection. And yes, you want to let your agent know that as well. Like, definitely let your agent know that you're planning on doing that as well. All right. So that's it for the buying and selling at the same time. With the right strategy, you can turn what feels like an impossible challenge into a successful transition to buy your dream home and sell your current home. Look, if you have any questions about this process, drop a comment below. I will answer all questions always, all the time. I try and do it as quickly as possible. And then if you do need a referral agent anywhere in the US, just click that link below, schedule a time with me, have a quick conversation, figure out what you like, or figure out what your needs and your wants are. And then I'll connect you with an agent. I'm part of a real estate brokerage that has almost 21,000 agents nationwide and in Canada. So I got a lot of great connections out there now. And if you are in the Philly suburbs and you're seeing this and you want to sell, you want me and my team to help you, click that link below. Look forward to speaking with you guys. Huge game on Sunday. My Eagles are playing the Ravens. Could be a potential Super Bowl match. Go Birds. Again, look forward to hearing from you guys. Have an awesome day. Have a good weekend and take care. Did I end it?